So now I want to get into each of those components. You've got the integrative movement, we've got the performance testing, we've got the body comp, and I think there's people out there that obviously have systems for each. I mean, we've got the FMS that you can do on the movement side, and there's tons of those. Z Health. I mean, at this point, there's a million different corrective screenings that you can use. There's also a few systems out there that have some performance testing. None that I've seen actually integrate the movements that you guys use in there, though. Most of them are higher level movements like, the big three, squat, clean, bench, or some variations of those. And then very few actually do body comp. I think people do that in assessments for fat loss training anyway. But let's just dive into that, the integrative movement testing. And why did you guys come up with what test do you use, first of all? I mean, we don't have to go into deep detail on every one, but what test do you use and why? And then, why not just use a system that's already out there?
Those are great questions, Ryan. We actually, at first, we started using FMS. Perfect system, why reinvent the wheel? And so for a while, we did try to make FMS fit into our system. It worked okay. As far as getting the results from the FMS, that was no problem. But how do we make it work in group setting, in a large group setting, 20 to 30 athletes? Found that it just took too much manpower, too much time. So what we did, and we realized, like I said, that it was a little too complex for what we were looking for. We still needed to do more assessments to see if someone would be safe in our training session. So we created our own integrative movement assessment. And the reason we wanted to be more integrative is because, like I said, the type of movements that we're doing in a training session. So we created 3 different ones. Just to give you a little overview, they progress how they would progress in a training session. So that's what's perfect about it. So we start everyone at a regressed model or movement pattern, and then you progress through. So we have a push-up plus, where we have a push-up, we have single leg push-up in there with a little shoulder retraction. Then we have an overhead press with a dowel rod, and then into an overhead squat. Then we also have a hinge pattern, a hinge with a reach and a T rotation. So you start, bilateral, then you start, go unilateral. So we have those 3 parts of the integrative movement. And like I said, it's very quick. We can do this in a group setting. We actually do it with every new athlete that comes in on every Saturday. And so it's a perfect system that one coach can work a large group of athletes through and still get quality out of it. So that's the integrative movement component.
That's awesome. I mean, you explained that, and I was running through movement patterns in my head. Thinking, okay, what's this covering? Is it missing anything? And you literally hit everything. I mean, you hit thoracic mobility and, hip movements, hip mobility, ankle mobility. You hit all of that as you progress somebody through. I think that's awesome. And coming up with a system that's really easy to use is really important, because what I think is, with a lot of the assessment systems, the FMS is great, like you said. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it if you're really skilled at using it. Gives you the information you need, and basically all I want to see is, are we testing something? Are we assessing something to gauge, is the program we're putting in place helping someone improve? And I think that your simple system does that. I think the big factors, I mean, there's always like hip mobility and thoracic mobility. Those are kind of the 2 that everybody needs, that most general population clients come in, and you guys tackle that. So that's awesome. How fast do you progress somebody through that? What do you see? Do you start everybody out when you assess someone in this integrative setting? You said you needed something to do it in groups, so you're assessing people in large groups, I'm assuming. Tell us how you get people started on that.
So what we do is in our system here at Performance QSA, we do every Saturday. Every new athlete has, some people call it an intake class or first steps class. We do what we call a training camp, because of our athletic model. You got to go through training camp before you quote unquote make the team. And so we go in groups of 15, sometimes 20 to 25 athletes. We have one coach that can take our athlete through the entire athletic analysis, and that's what happens. But as far as the integrative movement component, it's very easy to take a group of athletes through it. So, like I said, we start everyone in the regressed form, and then the coach will go one by one down the line, gives a general instruction to the whole group, and then we'll go one by one down the line, have the athlete scored, and if the athlete does not pass that particular part of the movement screen, then they score themselves, and then he moves on to the next one. So those that were not already scored are still, quote unquote, in the game, if you will, and they will progress through the exercise and the movement pattern. and then you keep on working through it until everyone has been scored. So it works very quickly, very easily, and you only have to work with the athletes that are still, quote unquote, like I said, in the game after you have gone through the whole group. So those 3 tests have about 2 to 3 patterns within each test, and so it happens very, very quickly.
That's perfect. That's awesome. I think that's a big issue that people have is they say, well, can I use this in my system? Is this adaptable to whatever business I'm running, whether it's personal training, which is pretty easy to use at any sort of assessment because you're one-on-one, or group training where I might have to take in 20, 30 people. I got that a lot with the transformation systems that we just created. It's like you have a kickoff and you say, how do I assess all these people? Well, this would be a great system to kind of assess that. Now, smart group training has a system where they use kind of the FMS and they use a corrected pattern with that. Say somebody comes in and they aren't able to do one, or they get, I guess their term would be red lighted, and where they just aren't able to even do the lowest level progression, or there's pain there. How do you guys address that? Do you still let them come into the program and be in the game?
We do allow them to continue into our program. So in the integrated movement assessment, there is we did borrow that from FMS. If they have pain or cannot perform the movement, we score them at a 0 because that needs to be, like you said, red light. And we need to know that. Ultimately, this is why we are assessing our athletes, so that we can put them in a safe environment. So we do make a note of that. But that, like I said, this is only one component of the 3. And there are a few tests in the integrated movement that do affect how you will perform the performance test, exercise and performance test. So if you get a 0 in something, we will automatically regress a movement for you in the performance test with that note. So we do allow them to, quote unquote, after they go through training camp and after they get through the entire athletic analysis, what that does is it puts our coaches, and we use a band system, which I'm sure we'll dive into a little more, but we use a band system that will give them an overall score. And this band system is kind of based off martial arts belts. And so what happens is you've got white, yellow, orange, red, and black bands. And after you've assessed, you are awarded a band. And what this does is you wear this band in a training session, and it gives our coach, even if it's not the coach that did your assessment, it gives them a quick, instant visual cue to let them know some baseline information about that athlete. So if I get an athlete that comes in there with a white band on, I don't know exactly what's wrong with them or what's got them at a white band, but I know that I need to regress them. And our training program is based on that. So we theoretically write 3 workouts on the board. We write a workout for the white and yellow bands, we write a workout for the orange bands, and then we write one for the red and black bands. But all it is a progression and a regression of the exact same workout. So it's not like there's more work on the coach or the facility that has to design it. It's just simple progressions or regressions, and allows the coach to not focus on changing the workout the whole time, but helping the athlete be safe and get through a training session and not feel like they're holding somebody back.
That's perfect. I think that's something that every coach should have in the program anyway. The progressions and regressions, various levels. You guys just have a really cued in system to tell you exactly where they are. There's very little guessing that goes in with this. I think that one question that we're definitely going to get before we get into like the performance analysis, the athletic analysis with these testings is what happens. Like you guys have a training camp every Saturday, so you have an intake system. I know the question we're going to get is what happens if somebody doesn't want to do this, or do you let people in without doing it? So tell us, what you guys do at QSA if that comes up, and how you build that in to just kind of make it a part of what you do.
Right. So when we initially implemented this system, there was a lot of kickback. People want to just jump in, they want to go now, they want to get in here, and they want to work out. But what we found as far as the results and the compliance and a kind of integration into our culture, that didn't work well when we just let people jump into our training program. For one, we did not have a chance to assess them. That's the biggest thing. We wanted to make sure we weren't harming our athletes. But then also we wanted them to understand, to see results, it was going to need to be more than just training. You can't out-train a bad diet. You might be able to neutralize one, but you can't out-train it. So we wanted to be able to let them know, that there's more to a lifestyle of ultimate fitness and wellness than just exercising. And so that is why we require everyone to go through training camp. And so what has happened is over the past few years, we've kind of changed that culture. People know this. Every once in a while, we'll get that one person that pushes back. But what happens is we let people know up front why we're doing training camp, what's going to happen in training camp. And when we tell them about this system and this very integrated system in terms of having these three components that are really going to help them achieve a lifestyle of wellness, they really buy in, and it's almost instantaneous. And so we found great results with that. And as far as letting someone come into the training program without one, we don't. What may happen is if they can't come to training camp on a Saturday, if they just can't make it, we will find a time during the weekend to try to accommodate their schedule. And so it's a non-negotiable, if you will. You got to go through this. And if anything, we can make it simply a matter of liability. We want to make sure we're covering our tail in that regard, but it's really more so about being able to deliver the ultimate experience to our athletes.
I think the key things you mentioned are the stuff I picked up on. One, you make it easy. It's every Saturday. So you guys have dedicated time to this. And you know that based off of, you guys bring in a lot of new people. So you guys have a great business system behind what you're doing. So you're bringing in a lot of leads, a lot of new prospects. So you can fill that up. Everybody might not need every Saturday, but you do it on regular intervals. That's one big thing I took. The other was you make it easy if somebody absolutely can't make it on a Saturday. You're going to try to find a time. You meet them where they're at. I think the other thing is it's your culture. It sticks to your values. But also when you bring them in and the difference between doing the training camp where you bring them in a group and assess the clients this way versus potentially the one-on-one. I see pros and cons of both. I think that the one-on-one, you could probably get a little more dialed in with their goals, but I also know in your guys' system, you do that at a different time. That's they're meeting with Vaughn to talk about goals, to get them set up on stuff. So they're doing that at a different time. So you're not missing that aspect of the one-on-one. But with the group setting, I think the assessment's probably a little less intimidating once you get them in and you start to get them comfortable with the group. They see that, hey, I'm not the only one that can't do this. They don't feel silly. And also the components of your assessment in the movement system there, the integrated movement piece, they're all stuff that they probably recognize as exercises. It's not like a weird setup of an assessment where they really don't understand what they're going through. It's a push-up, there's a squat, there's things like that, there's a press. They understand that that's part of a component, so they can see how that gets better. So I think that whole culture and tie-in, I think that, any of the viewers here today or the readers on the blog, that's something they can take away from this is how do I do this? I think, people try to jump in and throw a system like this in their business and they don't educate clients. They don't establish that culture. They don't make it easy and they get a ton of kickback and then they either bail on it or they make everybody mad. So.
Right. We kind of had that issue when we had FMS. When we used FMS, it was great, but they did not recognize the patterns as exercises. And then when you have a large group and you need multiple coaches involved, and with it being so particular in the scoring, it was not as consistent as we would have liked it, and we got a lot of pushback from it, and simply because of the time it took. So everything you just said is exactly what happened to us and what led us to create this system that resembles exercise, and it just really helps us too because it transitions well to training.
That's perfect. I think, unfortunately, I've seen too many business owners try to implement this stuff and set it up just a little bit the wrong way or not have the complete system. So that's the benefit of being able to learn from people, like yourself that have done this. Now let's talk about the athletic analysis part. This is one that really interests me because the movement stuff is great. I think you have to have that to some extent, but where I really enjoy things is let's see where people are at. Let's really test their fitness level because the movement analysis, the integrated movement stuff, it tells you if there's an issue, but I don't get to know anything about where they start. So let's talk about that because that's exciting to me.
Right. So the performance test, this is what when people hear this, that's the first thing they think about. They think about the performance component, which that's the sexy part. That's what everybody wants to hear. So what we've done with the performance test is we've taken different components of movement and we've made it happen in a very quick system. We test athletes up to 30 athletes and we get it done in around a 30 to 45 minute period. But what happens is we have 5 tests where an athlete will work for max effort for 1 minute, and then they will rest for 2 minutes and 45 seconds. So it's almost a 1 to 3 work to rest ratio, which it works out perfect. We work in group multiples of 15 and 30. So what we do is we put athletes in groups of 3, and so they cycle through. So it works out perfect. One athlete works for a minute, the other counts, the other rests. and then you just cycle through that. And there's a 15-second transition period in there to give you that 2 minutes and 45 seconds. But we have 5 movements. We've got hurdle hops, okay, 2-foot hurdle hops. Then we move into an inverted row, so we use rings or a TRX. Then we use body weight squats to a target, and then we use hand release push-ups, and then figure 8 sprints around cones at 10 yards. So we have a locomotion pattern in there. We've got a squat pattern in there. We have an upper body pull in there. Then we have an agility component and an upper body push with a little bit of mobility, hence the reason we do the hand release. The great thing about it is that it's auto-regulated. And what I mean by that is there are regressions and progressions within each exercise. So, for instance, on the hurdle hops, we might have an athlete that can just jump over the hurdle quick, 2 feet, jackrabbit back and forth, over and back. That's great. They may be in a group or a team with an athlete who cannot jump, who can't do impact. Well, there's a version. They can do high steps. They can do high knee walks over the hurdle. So everybody, multiple athletes of different abilities can do the exact same workout, but not feel like they're holding anybody back. And that translates very well to morale. People don't get intimidated, like you mentioned, in that when they get comfortable being in that group, which we have them in a classroom setting prior to going into the actual training. So they're getting to know each other. But it allows them to not feel intimidated like they're holding my back, and they can do it. And that's what gives them that confidence. So you progress through the entire program or testing, if you will, and there are progressions and regressions that allow everyone to work out at their ability and their level, feel comfortable with it, and also for us to get a good baseline understanding of people's fitness in every kind of way, almost every possible way that we train in a training session.
I think that my favorite parts about that are there's the regression and progression, so nobody feels left out. Like you're not eliminating any real one movement. I'm assuming unless in the integrative movement piece they present pain where it's just not appropriate. But no matter what level, they're going to be able to do this. The other thing I liked about is the team environment where you have that, because I think that I can already picture it. That people are cheering each other on, they're rooting them on, helps them get through that. And then there's all sorts of progressions that can go with that. So I always have something to shoot for. I think that's like the perfect component. The other piece of it is it doesn't require a lot of equipment. And you could do this anywhere. Like, could I say I'm in a big box gym? I'm a trainer in a big box gym. You know, if I had enough space to do the figure 8 sprints, that's probably the one that takes up the most time or the most space. If I have enough space to do that, I can perform this, correct?
You're exactly right. I mean, the hurdle hops, all you need probably about 3 feet of space to be able to clear the 1-foot hurdle, which you could have right next to a TRX or a ring hanging from the ceiling. As soon as you're done, you don't need it anymore, so you can just move it off to the side. We squat to a target. We use Dynamax balls, so that could be sitting right next to your hurdle. And then the hand release push-up, you just need a little bit of real estate. And then, as you mentioned, the 10 yards for the figure 8 sprint is all you need. And that's really what we wanted to do. We did not want a system where the coach had to take 30 minutes of setup, then it took an hour to test. And, we didn't want that because we were in group settings. We needed to make something quick. We need to make something very efficient. And theoretically, you could do this. You could do it at home if you had the space to do it. Do it in your driveway. So that's what we really love about it.
That's perfect, because I think that fits. There's no trainer that could say, I can't use this system. I mean, if you have the few pieces of equipment you need, you can make this, and you could probably even adapt it a little bit if you needed to fit that in there. I mean, you could get creative. But so that's perfect with the performance assessment. Now, how often do you guys retest that as far as the performance side?
So what we do is we work on 6-week training cycles. Okay, we go through all 3 components: body composition, integrative movement, and the performance test. We do that once a quarter, so within a year. We'll do that 4 times a year. Okay, but what we do as far as the body composition and the performance test, we do that at the end of every 6-week cycle. So that happens roughly about every two times a quarter. The reason we do that is, for one, the body composition is very important. That's that nutrition component. You don't want to hop on the scale and get the body fat numbers and something's got out of hand because you haven't assessed it in 6 months or 3 months per se. So we do that to kind of keep performance indicators or KPIs in the forefront of our athlete's mind. Okay, and then we do the performance test. So in-house, our athletes are used to doing this performance test, and so that it's not monotonous and boring per se, we will tweak it a little bit. We might change the work to rest ratios or something. based on the athlete's band color. We'll do that, or we might have them use resistance on the squat or whatnot. But nonetheless, we're still assessing the same movement patterns in the performance test every 6 weeks. And then once a quarter, we'll add in the integrated movement. And the reason we do that is because if you're focused on integrated movement, most people aren't going to take the time. We understand that, to take the time to really focus on flexibility and mobility. It's not fun. It's uncomfortable. So we understand that it's probably going to take you a little more time to really improve movement patterns in that regard. So we want to allot time for that, and that's why we do it on a quarterly basis, the whole component, all 3 components. But body comp and the performance test, we do it every 6 weeks in our training cycle.
Okay, perfect. Now, moving on to the body comp stuff, because that's the one I think people are going to have the hardest time with. Nobody wants to know how out of shape they are. Nobody really wants to know their body fat. It can be intimidating, especially in this group environment. So how do you guys implement that and then allow clients to try to make progress on that?
Right. So what we do is we have, obviously, a new athlete comes into training camp on a Saturday. What we do is, obviously, privacy is important. So we are doing it in a group setting, but what that means is we're going one by one. We're not reading out any numbers. We're not telling anybody. It's simply an interaction between the coach and that individual athlete. So they hop on the scale, they get their printout from the Tanita scale, and they're given that information. It's recorded on their scorecard. That will have eventually all 3 components. Then when we retest them after they've been in the program every 6 weeks and whatnot, what we do is we go through a very similar system. Coaches are at the door, our admin is at the door waiting for the athletes. Everybody knows it's that 6-week period because we do it during a deload week. What we've programmed in there. So the athletes know during that deload week, that's when we're going to do the body composition integrated movement. A little less strenuous, so we kind of taking the load off the body. So they know when they come in, they're going to hop on that scale real quick. So that's very, very important. So athletes will do that. And then we do that in a training session right before. So that's how our athletes get into that body composition component.
Okay, perfect. Do you get kickback on that with athletes wanting to do it? At all, kind of like the movement assessment. Do you ever get kickback?
We used to. Now people are, actually now people are coming to find us to get on the scale because they have been aware of it. And then we also have a component that, that's not so much part of the athletic analysis in terms of what we offer, but at QSA we have a nutrition coach on staff. So that's part of our culture, and that's what really assists this system very well. Now, everybody doesn't have that nor wants that, so they may not have that same thing. But because that is here in our facility, we find that our athletes are really they really do like it. And then we do have people. To be honest, we do have people that know it's coming, the whole testing and everything, and they'll try to skip out. They know it's coming and they won't show up. But I think everybody probably has that. We would love to have a great 100% participation rate, but it's probably closer to high 90s to tell you the truth.
Hey, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink all the time. So I think part of it is just the culture. I've handled this a lot with clients. And when you have this whole system that comes together with the 3 parts and you just kind of build it in that this is what we do. This is how we do things here. You don't have to make the body composition or the weight, any sort of weight checks or anything that you're doing that regards that as a big deal. It's just, that's part of what we do. I need this information so I can help you. And if we don't want to make it a focal point of your training, we don't have to. And I do the same thing with transformation contests. How do you get everybody to take pictures, before pictures? We just really didn't make it an option. It just was what you did. And it's a cool thing about the group setting is you get a few people to buy into it and they see others doing it. There's a little bit of that peer pressure. They'll go along with the crowd, even if they were a little uncomfortable at first. So I think, when you make it a part of your culture, you make it a part of what you do. It's our system. And then also not, bringing it up if that's not something that client wants to focus on. That's okay if they don't want to focus on this phase. You may recommend it. If they don't want to, you don't have to make it a big deal. I think that we get to control that, how that's relayed as the coach and the trainer. So that's perfect. Now that we've covered all 3 pieces of the athletic analysis, so the BEAST method, athletic analysis for fitness. I love it. You guys love acronyms. That's what I like about it. Make everything easy.